I was a Green Beret, but when I got out of the military, I had a very, very dark transition from the military. I had not dealt with a lot of the things that I needed to deal with that combat, I think, lays at the feet of combat veterans, particularly post traumatic stress, moral injury, survivor's guilt, and a lot of things that didn't make sense to me. I just pushed them down so I could stay in the fight. And then when I got out of the military, it hit me fast, and I had lost a lot of sense of purpose, a lot of my identity, and I nearly took my own life. And it had it not been for the intervention of a couple of mentors who pushed me towards this storytelling. Theater saved my life.
What's the story behind Scott becoming a Green Beret?
I grew up in a little logging town in Mount Ida, Arkansas, and we didn't even have a stoplight. And I met a Green Beret when I was 14. His name was Mark, and he really had a big impact on me because he was so one. He saw me and I was a run of a kid, pretty bullied, and he saw me uh, not as a 14-year-old kid that like just came up to him and pulled on his jacket, but like someone that was really enamored with what Mark did. And he sat down and he explained to me what Green Berets were and how they work by, with, and through indigenous people. And for a little small town kid that's sitting there listening to this, that usually eats lunch by himself, like that was really unbelievable. And I knew right then that's what I wanted to do at 14. And I think he saw that in me. He saw that I was and it never changed for me. It never wavered. I think I failed every school in the Army at least like 3 times. I failed every school I went to, but eventually made it through. My mom and dad were both civil servants. My dad was a wildland firefighter. My mom was a teacher. And so I just was raised with a sense of service, a sense of doing things bigger than yourself, and not taking yourself too seriously, and just trying to be grounded and to show up for your teammates. And that's what special forces is in its purest form, is 12 teammates going into deep, dark territory and working together to create relationships in places where there's no trust, and then mobilizing those people to stand up from the inside out. And yeah, I spent almost a couple of decades doing that. And I loved every second. Lost a lot of friends. I spent a lot of time away from my family. And now, years later, being able to talk about it here, where I think we're having our own kind of churn and disconnection at home, is a pretty big honor.
You know, backing up all those years of being in service and being, out there, how do you manage, how did you, or maybe you didn't until later, your own fear? How do you live that way? Do you enjoy that life? And because so many people who leave then are sort of not lost, but they don't have a sense of purpose. I don't know. I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit.
It's a great question. Um, I think now I'm retired, and 2 of my 3 sons are in federal service doing very similar work, and so the question takes on a new meaning now when your children are doing it and you're the one at home. But what I will say is, author Stephen Pressfield, who wrote Gates of Fire and The War of Art, former Marine, I think he really said it well when he said that the opposite of fear is not courage, it's love.
Mm.
And it's love for the teammate to your left and right. And I know for me, there were many, many times in my life and in my career that I was afraid. But it was the love of my teammates and the love that they had for me that would give me strength and would give me what I needed to make it through that situation. And many times I felt like I failed them, and many times I still do feel like I failed them. And it has nothing to do with being afraid or not being afraid, because the reality is we're going to be afraid when we face moments in life. The question is, what do we do with that fear? And one of the most amazing things about special forces, at least for me, was that I stood on the shoulders of these amazing humans who I knew, even though I was afraid, they loved me so much that they would literally run through walls for me or take a bullet for me. And I felt the same for them. And it's just one of the most special things in the world to know that you have that much love for a teammate. And I think that's why in many cases it's so hard to come home,
Yeah.
because many of them didn't,
Yeah.
and you ask yourself a lot of hard questions for the rest of your life. But Honestly, that's the best answer I can give, is that it wasn't about necessarily managing fear. It was just knowing that you had this amazing love with your teammates that you could get through whatever life threw at you.
So much to talk about when talking with you, but you did talk about moral injury. Those were your words. And I know in your book, you've written many books. For the audience, please, you have to go and find all the incredible things that Scott has written. But when you talked about what happened, Operation Pineapple Express, which is, this book has come out recently. It's unbelievably powerful. It's an incredible story.
Thank you.
But there were a group of people that were sort of left behind. And can you just talk a little bit about how that came to be and how you were organizing yourselves in this extraordinary, I don't know what you would call it.
Oh yeah, I'm still figuring that out myself, Priscilla. It's it was a group of mostly veteran volunteers. It wasn't even a nonprofit at the time. It was really just you know what it was? It was a self-organizing group of volunteers. That's really what it was. Mostly men and women who had served in Afghanistan. And the thing is, for folks who have not worked in those places, there's kind of a when you build partner teams in other countries, which is a lot of what Green Berets and other elite units do. There is there's like an implicit eternal promise that you have with that kind of work, which is I have your back. You have to have that. If you don't, then the partner nation that you're working with, whether it's a reluctant farmer in a remote community that's facing Taliban retribution, or whether it's a 17-year-old Afghan commando who, is his first time into battle and you're right there at his shoulder, they have to know you have their back. Just the way in any high performing team, there's got to be that. There's got to be that implicit trust that just it permeates everything. And so we're conditioned at a very early age, Priscilla, in special forces, in the elite units that's your capital.
Yeah.
That's your operating, that's your book of business, are your relationships. Seriously. It's less about rank. It's less about status. It's more about what are your relationships? Do you know this person? Do you trust this person? Do they trust you? And you spend years going back and forth to these places that most people in the world don't even know exist. And you build this deep social capital so that when there's a need to deal with, for example, a violent extremist threat in a safe haven that no one even can locate on a map, there's a little Green Beret team that has relationships in that area and they can mobilize it, right? And it's the stuff that most Americans and Westerners, I think, don't really know and frankly don't need to. I mean, it's what we do. However, that comes at a cost, right? And so it has to be, those promises have to be honored. And we've done that really since World War II. But then when we found ourselves leaving Afghanistan the way we did, almost overnight, it left our 20-year allies. We've been working with these individuals for 20 years, completely on the run. And now the Taliban, who we had fought for 20 years, was now hunting them. And so many of us who had retired, I'd been retired for almost a decade. One of my very dear friends, Nizam, an Afghan commando who I'd met at a young age, was now on the run and texting my phone. The Taliban were texting his phone. So it was, how is there a way to help him perhaps maneuver through those Taliban checkpoints using our veteran network, dropping pins and communicating with each other and getting him close enough to the gate that we could make phone calls and get him pulled inside. We did do that. We got him in, and then that began an evolution of self-organizing work where we just kept going for 11 days doing that and ultimately got in around 1,000 Afghan commandos and their families. Even the Minister of Women's Affairs, the most wanted woman in Afghanistan, came through what we called the Pineapple Express, an open sewage canal, a 4-foot hole in the fence, and was pulled in by paratroopers. And she now lives in England with her family.
I mean, there's like a foundational principle or morality. I feel like you got to take care of these people.
Yeah, and I think that you mentioned moral injury a little while ago, and that's something that I'm still wrestling with. It's why I wrote Pineapple Express. I'm turning it into a one-person show now, that I'm going to perform for the same reason, because I think a lot of people don't necessarily know what a moral injury is when they hear, but if you think about it, we had 800,000 folks that fought from the United States in Afghanistan. Um, you had more than that from the Afghan National Army fought. They had close to 100,000 killed in their ranks. You had all of the NATO soldiers. And for all of us, we answered the call for 20 straight years. And for many people, multiple tours. Um, Less than 1% of the American population served in Afghanistan, yet they did multiple tours, many of them. And then all of a sudden, the whole thing just ends overnight. And the people that many of us are alive because of them
Yes.
were just left to be hunted. And that is a violation of that moral code you're talking about. It's the moral code that guides you and governs you when, in fact, we were held to that account by senior leaders to the point that you would receive punishment if you did not adhere to it on the battlefield. And yet that same code was violated openly. And by the way, I'm like you. I stay away from the politics of it. This has been going on since Vietnam, since the Montagnards.
Yeah.
We have a bad habit as a nation of multi-generational abandonment of our allies. And it's not a good look, but it is the impact on warriors, diplomats, anyone who builds relationships in foreign places and builds social capital. It is a moral injury, and it's an injury of the soul, and it's a very dangerous injury that only leaders can help restore, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, how do you, not become cynical? I mean, to have the sort of suddenly everything changes. You go in, you were a young man when you wanted to do this, 14, when you had your calling for this, and suddenly the things that you were fighting for, presumably these values, these American values or a way of life, how does that sit with you?
I fight really hard not to get cynical. I don't want to do that because I feel like my 3 sons are watching me,
Yeah.
and I don't want to be that way. So what I found for me is storytelling is art. I've become an artist. I write plays, and I perform them with other veterans, and we travel around the country. My first play, we put 28,000 miles on a U-Haul van, and we toured all over the country performing this show and everything from high school cafeterias to office complexes to Steppenwolf Theater in Chicago. But I found for me that helps me make sense of the things that don't make sense. And it also gives me a platform to connect with others, civilians who maybe don't even know what this is all about or why a promise matters so much. And so we can have that conversation. And then we do a talk back after every show.
Yeah.
Where we sit as a community and we talk about with civil discourse, the hard things like we used to do. And that's how I do it. That's what keeps me alive. That's what keeps me sane, and it hopefully keeps me relevant to dealing with these problems. And that's probably what I'll do till I die is this approach.
Now, what did you think when you were pulling out of the driveway with the U-Haul and there was a long road in front of you and you had no idea whether people would come to the show or not come to the show? What were your thoughts what were your thoughts going forward? Because that's not a normal, it's just like that's your creativity expressing itself in a unique way.
Yeah, man, you're right. That's such a great question. It was the ultimate midlife crisis, Jesse. I mean, first of all, the first show, a lot of people came, but I think it was to actually, because I didn't even start acting until I was 50. And so I think a lot of people were thinking, man, I got to see this, like what is he going to completely break down on stage? Like, is it all going to come to pass right here in front of me? And, a lot of them were family and friends. But then when they saw it, because I traveled to New York quietly for a year and I studied under Carl Bury and Larry Moss. I mean, the Green Beret in me was like, hey, if you're going to do this, you got to do this right. And so I put the work in. We all did, our whole ensemble, only one professional actor in our ensemble. And, but then as I continued to travel with this, like you said, with the U-Haul, it was hard because we would do some performances and there were 12 people in the audience, and you're just, and my wife, God bless her, our boys are still in high school and I'm wanting to travel the country as an actor and do a play that we're not even sponsored. And you know what? She saddled up right alongside me and we did it. And it was very difficult. We traveled with our own counselors, did PTS interventions in the lobbies. But the crazy thing, Jesse and Priscilla, was at some point, Gary Sinise heard about it. Lieutenant Dan from Forrest Gump, huge advocate for veterans, saw the play, reached out, and ended up sponsoring it. And that's when everything changed.
Did you know he was in the audience?
So the first time we turned it into a film that we did ourselves on Amazon Prime during COVID, and that's what he watched. And so he reached out to us, and he and I did the deal over the phone. It was amazing. He's like, "Nope, we're going to do this. I couldn't believe it." And he sponsored us for a whole year. But then when we performed in San Diego, somebody comes running backstage and they're like, "Gary's in the back row." And I was like, "Oh dear God."
I hope he told you after you performed, not before.
But he was so gracious. He came backstage afterwards and spent time with us. And he would call me before every show just to check in with me because he's an amazing stage actor. You see him a lot.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm a theater person. I come from the theater, so I love hearing this.
Oh, theater saved my life, without a doubt. And the other thing, too, there's all these perceived divides in the country.
Yeah.
You think of like the men and women of special ops, and then you think of theater, and you think like, okay, they probably don't hang out together. I have never been received so graciously as when I walked into the theater community as a 50-year-old man, completely broken, and just saying, I've got this play and I really want to do it, and I could sure use some help. And man, the people that came to my aid from the theater community and still do to this day, I've never seen anything like it. It is it's probably one of the most reaffirming things I've seen in a long time.
Are they helping you with the structure? Are they helping you with the words? Are they helping you with the idea? Like, what do they do? They watch it for you and then say, well, hey, you could try this. Like, what's the process like?
Yeah, all of it. Like right now, for example, I'm working on the one-person show, 11 days, the story of Operation Pineapple Express, which is going to premiere in December in Tampa, and then we're going to tour. But the collaborator that I'm working with is a guy named Jason, and he has a career. He has a career in the theater, everything from acting to coaching to directing to produce, all of it, right? And he's right at my shoulder. We decided to do this. We wrote together back and forth. So we did the writing. And because, writing a nonfiction book is so radically different than putting a one-person play up.
Yeah.
I mean, even just the stage directions and things I would never know how to do. So he helped me with the structure and how to get the general shape of it, and then rolled right into being my director. And now he's directing me, and we're putting we're getting it on its feet. We've done developmental readings. We did our first developmental reading at the Special Forces Team House in Tampa. Mm-hmm. So you've got like theater folks in there, and you've got these old crusty Green Berets in there. And it was so awesome. And so, yeah, it's really eclectic, but every aspect of it, because what I'm trying to do, we have our nonprofit is called Task Force Pineapple, and we're really about using storytelling as a way to heal and educate, warrior storytelling. So we're building these really cool relationships with the theatrical community on how to do that really well. And yeah, it's incremental, but it's fun.
The thing about theater, though, of course, is the vulnerability, which I'm sure they all respond to you, the actors and the theater folks. It's the folks that are vulnerable. That's what you want. That's the gold in the theater, because that's what everybody in the room is feeling, is sensing authenticity and the truth. You're trying to tell some truth about your life that we can all connect around, right?
So true. But what the challenge was, I faced it, and many of the other actors who are veterans face as well, and military family members, by the way, they're in it also, is that everything that you do in the military, particularly at war, is the opposite of what you have to do on stage.
Right.
So like when you're in combat, you can't, yes, you can demonstrate relatability and vulnerability, and you need to do that when you're building relationships. But when you're going into a gunfight, you have to do the opposite of what is oftentimes required on stage. And so, and
Mm.
whether or not that's right is kind of not the point, because most of us have done it for decades. So for me, for example, my acting coach looked at me and he said, Scott, for you to even tell this story on stage, you're going to have to unlearn everything you learned about combat, about communication. You're going to have to get a breath coach. You're going to have to do diaphragmatic breathing. You're going to have to go to therapy. And I did all those things. I was like, okay. And he was absolutely right, and you know this better than anybody, Priscilla, like what you have to do to honestly let the audience have their experiences, all that armor has to come off.
Yeah.
So it took a long time for me to do that. Still a process for me. We travel with our own psychologist, who is he's there for us as well. And because we get seriously jammed up with PTS and survivor's guilt and all kinds of stuff while we're performing, but we just find ways to work through it and to move through it authentically, as you said. So yeah, I think that for us, it's kind of been an experiment in coming home, using what our ancestors have known to, civil society has done this. Shakespeare kind of had this figured out, coming home from war. And so it's not new. We've just disconnected from it in the West, and we're trying to bring it back.
When you go off to war, were you married when you went off?
I was. I've been married. She's just sitting off camera here. We've been married 30 years, and this Veterans Day, in fact.
Can she say hello, or she doesn't want to say hello?
She's giving me a look now. All right.
The look of like, don't put me on there.
Just got back from playing tennis.
Hi.
This is my wife, Monty.
It's one thing to go off to war and have a family member go off to war, and there's an incredible cost to the family to do that. What was it like when he started going off to do these plays? Was it the same kind of, like he said, well, it was really hard on the family, but was it the same level of difficulty?
Well, I got to go with him this time.
Yeah. But
So
the first
that
time he
makes for
started
a
it,
huge
the
difference,
first time he did it, was it like, whoa, what's he doing? What is this?
It was very much like, what is he doing? Because never in my wildest dreams would I ever have thought that he would be wanting to like act, but he very much wanted to, and he was very headstrong with it and dove right into everything he needed to do to get ready. And so I just tried to support him the best way I could. It's kind of what I've always wanted to do, is just try to kind of be back behind him to support him. So
Yeah.
But no, it's been fun. It's definitely a road that I didn't think I'd ever be on, but it's been a good time.
Right.
I'll tell you this too. She one of the things that she did was the actor, when we first did the play, her name was Aim, and she was playing the protagonist's wife, a special forces spouse, and the actor had a car accident. It was a minor car accident, but she couldn't show up to the show, and Monty had been to every single show. And so when we found out 30 minutes before curtain that the actor wasn't coming, everybody just turned and looked at Monty, and she was like, "Oh God!"
Did you do it? Did she do it?
She did it.
Of course
She did it. That's right. Of course she did. She went. We went out on stage and we said the actor Aim has had a car accident. She's okay, but Scott's wife Monty is going to play the role of Lynn. She will be on book, and the show will begin in 5 minutes. Place went nuts, and she did amazing.
Yeah.
Hopefully that never happens again. It's mandatory to have an understudy now, to where that never happens again.
We work a lot with Blue Star Families. Are you familiar with Blue Star Families?
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. Yeah.
So when you were saying, Monty, about we've had the privilege of talking with a lot of the families in the last couple of months, and that sort of attitude of you're there to support, that allowed Scott to go out there and do the most difficult things in the world to protect the rest of us. So it's a huge, extraordinary thing, military families. I don't think enough people really understand what really goes on and the sacrifices that you all collectively take on. So again, thank you. So it does make sense that you would go and you would be in the play, is all I can say.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
It's nice to meet y'all.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, our whole team that travels with so we have a play called Last Out that's about a military family, a Green Beret and his family fighting the Afghanistan war, and then another play that's coming up called 11 Days, and it's about Pineapple Express, the withdrawal. But the one that travels with the full group, everybody in even our tour manager is a military spouse, lost her husband to suicide. We have a Gold Star mother that travels with us that we rally all the families of the fallen every town we go to. If you all get a chance on Amazon Prime, it's called Last Out. But it is it's all like, again, we shot that one during COVID. It's a low budget film, but it really tells the story of the military family. And I encourage people to watch that. And you're right. The military family is our greatest national treasure, in my opinion.
You know, when you have your talkbacks, when you're going out, what is that? Do you have like a counselor with you though? Because I would imagine sometimes a lot of stuff is coming up and suddenly you're in, you know, a public space.
Yes.
And
Yes.
how do you handle that?
So we made a decision early on because the entire cast is military, either veteran or military family members. So for our own safety, we traveled with a counselor, a trauma counselor. But then what happened was exactly what you said. First show, a couple of individuals get up and they walk toward the exit. They weren't leaving because they didn't like the show. They left because stuff was coming up for them and they didn't know what to do with it. Yeah. So they were out in the lobby, you know, like pacing, and Doc Diego, he's our mental health counselor, he followed them out. And he immediately grabbed them, talked to them, brought their emotional temperature down. We've got some non-invasive, non-chemical protocols that are amazing. He did those. They got their emotional temperature down. And guess what? Right back into the show.
What were some of those techniques?
A lot of breath work.
Right.
You know, diaphragmatic breathing.
So he'd just go up to them and say, hey, you know, try this.
He would sit with them in an adjacent room and just get them kind of calmed down. And then there's several other techniques based on neuro-linguistic programming that can calm the brain, that are very effective. They haven't necessarily made their way into the VA and mainstream, but you know, a lot of your 501c3s are using them as very effective peer-to-peer modalities. And so, you know, just getting their emotional temperature down was the main thing, and making sure they understood they're okay. And then also follow up, making sure that they're connected to somebody on the other side, because this is an individual not getting help, helping them connect with resources. And again, this was discovery learning. We thought we were going to do a play. Yeah. But we're like, you know, and you think about if someone goes sees Saving Private Ryan, Hacksaw Ridge, they walk out, they are how they are until they're able to work through it. And we thought, we're not going to do that. We're going to do the best we can to make sure we're there responsibly. So we've always traveled with mental health providers. And then in the talkback, we use the talkback as the decompression chamber, because you know, a lot of times it's civilians who are the most wrecked because they've never experienced anything like this, and the play hits hard. And so they're wrecked, you know, and so we make sure it's just in the community talkback. The actors come out on stage, they sit with the audience. Doc Diego usually talks, and he talks about what's going on, and we just sit together. And sometimes the dadgum talkback will go longer than the play, but they're phenomenal, and they do have a really steadying impact on everybody's mental state. And we make sure we try to look in everybody's eyeballs before they go home and make sure they're okay.
Well, it's interesting you brought up Saving Ryan. Okay. Because I was going to ask if there was any film that you feel really connected to, where it feels close to your story.
Yeah, several. I mean, I think nowadays some of the films they're making really hit hard. The problem with it kind of though is, I don't know how to say this, like in some ways it's kind of turned into like war porn. You know what I mean? It's like, how accurate can you make it? And it's like, good God. I mean, do we really want to, you know, I don't need to see that anymore. Like, I'm good. You know what I mean? Like, I'll give you an example. We did the play for a group of Gold Star family members in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And we always bring them up on stage ahead of time, and we talk to them, and we honor them. We explain to them what's going on, and we ask them, you know, if they have any questions. So they're completely read into the show. They know what's coming. And it's amazing how much they actually take care of everybody else in the audience. But there was one particular show where a young 16-year-old girl stood up and she said, you know, it was so good to watch this play and to see Danny Patton go through what he went through, you know, because in watching Danny go through his time in service, I understand, you know, why my daddy loved you guys so much. And she goes, he's not going to be able to walk me down the aisle. He's gone. But I didn't have to sit there and watch the blood and the gore. What I saw was the brotherhood and the love. And she goes, I get it now, you know. And so while the content is rough, it's emotional truth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Versus like war porn, where how much can I make a bullet zip by your ear? And I don't really connect with that. And maybe it's just because I just can't. Maybe some people dig it, but there are a few, like Saving Private Ryan really resonates with me. Lone Survivor, some of those, but I've never, my thing was I wanted to do a theater. I wanted it because to me, theater is so much more intimate.
Yes.
You know, the interesting thing about war films is it's really the only place where you can see how the nation feels about, you know, war at the time that they're made. So like, you know, if you're watching Saving Private Ryan, that's how we felt about the war when Steven Spielberg made that. How do you think about cinema as it relates to being a storytelling tool to help us get through some of these things?
I think it's important. I mean, and I'll tell you why, because I think cinema reaches more people than theater ever could.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so as a medium for storytelling, I think it's essential. I guess maybe we need to step back and examine how we're telling these stories.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, if you look at, for example, if you look at movies that were made about the global war on terror, Iraq, Afghanistan,
True.
You know, those were fairly popular wars in the sense that they were romanticized, right? And it was a very small percentage of Americans fighting them. And it was usually, it's a Navy SEAL or an Army Ranger or a Delta, like it's all elite. And you look at your streaming series today, it's usually an ex-SEAL or an ex-paratrooper, you know. So I think, and I do think there is a higher regard for the military, certainly than what we put our poor Vietnam veterans through.
Yeah.
You know, and so I do think that there is a place for cinema in this, a very big place. And I'm in fact wanting to get into that more with, you know, with my own artistic endeavors. Thank you.
We will. They'll come to you.
What can you tell me about that image of the iceberg behind you?
Yeah, so I use an iceberg when I'm teaching human connection, and the tip of the iceberg is the modern world, and the bottom of the iceberg is the ancient world where we all come from. So I started teaching Green Berets that a long time ago, and now I teach it all over the place. Is that what's below the waterline is actually how we navigate the world.
When you say the world below the surface, what do you mean?
Well, like, you know, we all come from civil societies of, you know, traditional status behavior where, you know, the acronym MESS that's up there is, I say that we're meaning seeking, emotional, social storytellers who struggle. Like that's who we are at our core. And regardless of what society we hail from traditionally, that's our 1.0 operating system. And the more we can connect back to that, the more relevant we are at the tip of the iceberg and the problems that we face today.
Is it universal principles beneath that we're all tied to? And that are never changing, that exist in all societies?
Timeless. I mean, you think about it, we've been around in, you know, the bottom part of that iceberg, if that's our human nature, we've been around traditional status society 250,000 years. You know, we've had liberal democracies and capitalism maybe a couple of hundred years. So our biology is all ancient. Even our social mechanisms are ancient. They're far older than the societies that we're operating in now. And we've just completely disconnected from what our grandparents knew to be true.
when I say the iceberg, though, I got cold. Is there a coldness? Is there a sense of isolation? What does it stand for, the metaphor?
Yeah, I think, well, metaphorically, I found it just to be because there's so much of our humanity is below the surface. It's invisible to us, even though it's right there. There's that. I never thought about the temperature piece. That's really good. And then the other one that I've always found to be very, very relevant metaphorically is it wasn't the tip of the iceberg that sunk the Titanic. It was the part of it you couldn't see. And I think both the preponderance of threats and opportunities that I see available to us today as leaders are below the surface in our humanity. They're the things that we've just completely lost connection with: storytelling, active listening, nonverbal physicality, reciprocity, social capital, the things that really are innate drivers of how we have an impact in the world, that are just our superpower. Most folks don't even seem to know they exist.
And where do you think that disconnection comes from?
I've looked at it a lot, Jesse, over the years. There's guys like Robert Putnam and Bowling Alone, other social scientists who assert that it started in the early 1970s. Everything from the Vietnam War, the protests, moving into the suburbs, modern technology, mass communications. I mean, there's a range of drivers. But one thing that is consistent is if you look at polling data, right, that asks us about trust and social capital and relationships, you do see a palpable downswing in the early 1970s. And so you can land on like what the real root. I don't know that there is a root cause. I think it's a myriad of things. I certainly also believe that the onset of technology, particularly, the handheld dopamine dispensers, have rapidly accelerated our disconnect from the natural world, right, and everything that's in it. And so that's one of the things too that I'm trying to get folks to pay a little bit more attention to, is just the natural world, what's in it, and the innate drivers that are within us. Technology's fine, but if we ignore the natural world and our biology, we do that at our peril.
So when we see something come in changing our society, like now we hear about AI every day, right? And or take LLMs, like kids aren't going to be able to write, or whatever we think. Do you think that takes us further from universal principles, or do you think that it's just an ever-changing landscape of time and place where we start to learn in different ways?
I've heard both arguments, and both are sound arguments to a point. I think that Adam Ghazali writes in his book The Distracted Mind that we are ancient brains struggling to make sense of a high-tech world. I think the challenge is, and this is again back to my iceberg, what's below the waterline, 80% of our human nature is primal, and it really struggles to keep up with the innovative technologies that are rapidly coming at us. And I think it struggles to apply them responsibly sometimes. And I'll give you an example. This weekend, I just did a storytelling retreat for business founders, nonprofits, veterans, combat veterans, first responders. We went out to a retreat site and we worked on storytelling. We worked on people's stories. And one of the folks that came to it had actually used AI to craft the initial version of their story, right? And so literally their backstory, the story that gives us a sense of them, was written by a machine. And as they told the story, it was completely detached. It was as if they were giving a speech about their life. Whereas the other people, and this person had been through a lot, cancer survivor and other things, other folks that had been through similar scars were working through their story. They were struggling. They were really having a hard time writing their story. And in many ways, they were on their own hero's journey as they wrote about their hero's journey. Their body was literally going through a metamorphosis of change as they made sense of their life through storytelling, which is what we're wired to do. But then when they told their stories, there was an emotional resonance that was completely absent from the person who used AI to craft their story. And so my concern is that we are outsourcing elements of our biology that make us uniquely human. For example, emotional resonance. If you have a machine craft your story, then you will tell your story like a machine, which means you will not have that emotional resonance that you need for authentic influence. So I think there's arguments to be made for both, but I think if you make it just from the tip of the iceberg with no appreciation or adherence to what's below the waterline with our humanity, then it's not a sound argument because you're not even connected to your nature as you make it.
I think you're teaching people about storytelling so they can better express themselves, but ultimately they're trying to get help. Yeah.
Also, isn't it to heal as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, here's the thing. I discovered storytelling, I was a Green Beret. So a lot of what we do in Special Forces is we work with indigenous communities, building social capital in trust depleted places to help them stand up on their own. That's kind of our approach. So I've always had an appreciation for old school interpersonal skills. But it was when I got out of the military, and I'm going to get to your question, but when I got out of the military, I had a very, very dark transition from the military. I had not dealt with a lot of the things that I needed to deal with that combat, I think, lays at the feet of combat veterans, particularly post-traumatic stress, moral injury, survivor's guilt, and a lot of things that didn't make sense to me. I just pushed them down so I could stay in the fight. And then when I got out of the military, it hit me fast, and I had lost a lot of sense of purpose, a lot of my identity, and I nearly took my own life. And it had it not been for the intervention of a couple of mentors who pushed me towards this storytelling workshop, where I met a mentor who was a former NFL football player who had his own struggle with transition. And he kind of reintroduced me to storytelling, as Priscilla said, as a way to heal oneself, as a way to, because according to Dr. Ivan Tyrrell in The Human Givens, the brain is a metaphorical pattern matching organ, right? So the brain, and it has a mandate to make sense of the world. So storytelling is a sense making tool. It does heal the left and right hemispheres of the brain as we move through trauma. We're seeing more and more of that through neuroscience. It provides the brain with new patterns. It provides the listener with new patterns of what's possible. But to me, more than anything else, it's a sense-making tool. And that's where I really love storytelling so much, because I work with a lot of combat veterans who have seen severe trauma, Gold Star family members, first responders, business leaders who have just had traumatic childhoods, things that they've been through. Using storytelling first as a way to make sense of your own lived experience as the beneficiary of the story, and then at some point in that narrative process, finding a way to repurpose that story now where you are the helper and the audience is the beneficiary of it. So I think it's just one of the coolest sense-making tools on the planet. And I agree with you, Jesse. I don't think we ever arrive. I don't think we cross our legs and sit on the cliffside and say, okay, now I know myself. I think it's just an ongoing thing, but I think having storytelling alongside us as we move through this thing called life is a really, really useful approach.
Did the group acknowledge to this woman, I think you said it was a woman who used AI, was there a feeling or understanding that there was a difference between the way that story was communicated to the group? Not to shame, but to, what was the response to everybody else? I mean, from everybody.
We had a private conversation because she's one of the ones that I'm coaching.
Got it.
And so she did it well intended as a way to, plus, like Jesse said, the pressure of getting up in front of people. You want to do well, even though it's not performative. It's not designed to be. We still feel like it is, right? Because we're always worried about our status. So it was well intended. And so, but she felt off.
Yeah.
And she's like, I don't understand. And so we started talking about, well, how did you develop your pre-work? And then okay. Well, so try this. And so I, put her back to the process of just moving the pen, writing her own hero's journey, speaking it into the world from that place. It was much clunkier, much more difficult, but also much more authentic in her own body. And it became an embodied experience. Up until that point, everything she had done had been disembodied.
Yes.
right? And so this gave her an embodied experience, ultimately alignment with her story, and it was really, it's a very powerful story that's going to help a lot of people. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't even necessary to. I did, however, and I have continued to talk about it publicly with permission because there's a lot we can learn from it.
I have one more sort of question. I don't know how it's happened in this country where we're just not taking good care of of everyone, of all our veterans. And you, thank God, have found a tool and a life for yourself that has helped you and all of the people around you. But like, I mean, what needs to change?
A friend of mine he was a special operator, and he did his PhD on military transition, and he studied this problem for a long time, and he did his dissertation on it, and he finally gave it and defended it and all that. And I asked him, I said, well, what'd you come away with, man? And he said, he goes, it really comes down to this. He goes, this is kind of what I found. Most veterans don't need therapy. What most veterans, particularly those who've been to combat, what they need is they need a deep connection with their neighbor. They need the opportunity to have their stories heard without judgment. And then they need to walk that path home with their neighbor at their side. And I was like, damn, that's pretty darn good. And what if we just kind of took that approach at a community level, versus the thank you for your service, which I get it. I understand. And it's a heck of a far sight better than what we did post-Vietnam. But I just think after a 20-year war, we're past that. And we actually need our war fighters and our families like Monty that you just met and others. We need them leading us here at home, because I think they have a skill set for leadership that is in real high demand today. They face things that are really complex and ambiguous, and they have ideas and perspectives that could help us. But because of the way the war ended, and because of the way that modern warriors are just kind of isolated from the pack, we're losing them. And we're losing some to suicide. We're losing some to alcoholism and homelessness. But most of all, they're just kind of walking off on their own, right, and checking out from civil society. And that's just such a shame. I mean, it's a shame, because we're losing an element of human capital that we desperately need. So for me, I think it's what you all are doing. I think it's finding ways to just connect and just stay at, persistently at the shoulder and identify the hard problems, sit for the talk back, right? Just have the conversation, figure out what those problem sets are, and then step forward on them together, bottom up, grassroots, one community at a time. Because in my latest book, Nobody's Coming to Save You, that's the whole premise, is nobody's coming. I think if we're going to really get veterans back into the game and do what you just suggested, Priscilla, it's folks like you all who are just looking for ways to fill the gap and stepping into the breach and just work it one connection at a time. And I do think that is a viable option. I do think that's our best last hope.
Yeah. Scott, it was fantastic.
Yeah. Keep us informed, Scott, of what you're doing,
You bet.
When you get that play up, come back on again and tell us about how it's going.
I will. You'll have to come see it too. And if you get a chance, check out Last Out on Amazon Prime.
We'll do that for sure.
I think you'll enjoy it. All
Okay.
right.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. See you later.